Welcome, everyone, to ResV Systems. Coach Reslow here, and I have a wonderful surprise for all of you. I have two of the top Rhode Island volleyball legends on with me on this call for the high school level. These two guys have won more championships than, quite frankly, I can imagine, considering as a coach, I never won one. I was always in the semifinals. But with me, I got Eddie Delsignore, the Golden Arm from Bishop Hendricken, and David Rufful, Mr. Perfect from Bishop Hendricken. Rufful has won more state championships. I think you're 8 for 8, right, Dave?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the man knows how to win. And Eddie, you got 2 under your belt. So again, welcome both you guys. Really excited to have you on the ResV podcast. Got a lot of questions for you, and I'm excited to have you.
Yeah, same. We were chatting a little bit off. I love this content you're putting out. I would have found this awesome as a player in high school. So I'm happy to come on and chat it up a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. There were definitely players before our time that I was interested in hearing from. So I think it's unique perspective for sure.
Awesome. Well, first off, and most importantly, I want to thank you guys for not only being on, but, as very successful professionals in your life to kind of come on and take a step back and think back decades ago to when you were in high school. It's pretty impressive. I really appreciate it. The first thing is, let's start with Ruff. Your background in the sport. You were more of a basketball guy, if I recall, and you ended up playing D1 ball at Dartmouth. What drew you to volleyball when you were getting started there?
Yeah, so probably about 8 years old, I'm playing basketball all year round. But at about 9 years old, I saw my first volleyball game. And so my brother's actually 5 years older than me, so he was at Hendricken. And so I met Coach Harry when I was like 9 or 10. So yeah, I was inspired by my brother who's dominating me and everything. He's just not an older brother. He's a big brother. He's 6'6". He's a big fella. And then also just waiting for anticipation in the stands as a young kid, I was impressed by Rocco Baldelli at the time. So, and also having my brother mingling with the guys as a young kid, I was able to actually go up and meet the players and get a volleyball. And so at home, I started peppering for fun, like in my head, envisioning someday I'll be Rocco. That's like everybody wanted to do. So that was kind of my introduction at 9 years old, 10 years old. So peppering at the house, it was just fun. And in my head that maybe someday I'd play at Hendricken or play high school basketball. So I saw the playoff games at a young age. So I was impacted. And yeah, Coach Mike Harrington knew me at the time as this little kid and didn't think too much of it. And we didn't see each other again for, a few years after that, probably.
Rocco. Yeah. I mean, Rocco Baldelli, arguably the top volleyball player to ever come out of Rhode Island. And certainly one of the things that happened in 2003-4, they switched the seasons where now baseball players were unable to play volleyball because volleyball was in that season. And, I was always against that. I was like, dude, baseball guys have that natural arm swing that would work in volleyball. And, if it was back then, Rocco wouldn't be able to play. So, and Rocco ends up having a professional career, and now he's a coach for the Twins, I believe. And, he's had a remarkable career, but interesting. I didn't know that Rocco was a thing for you. How about you, Del Sig?
Yeah, I mean, you sort of touched on it a little bit. I wanted to play baseball. That was my sport in high school. And when I came into high school, volleyball was still in the fall, and I wanted to get in shape basically for baseball season. And it was either play football or run track or play volleyball. And I didn't want to run or get hit. So I chose volleyball, had played it honestly as a gym class sport in middle school. Knew nothing about it other than, what you would picture a middle school gym class looking like. Didn't know there was a better level than that. So played it and immediately fell in love with it and got 2 years of sort of a separate sport, being able to play it in the fall and then baseball in the spring. And then going into my junior year, sort of had to make a decision. And by that point I was hooked. So it was a pretty easy decision to keep playing. But yeah, it definitely helped to pitch and to throw, and then to have that motion be, one of the main things in the sport. But yeah, I was fortunate enough to not have to make that choice, because I think, had that switch happened or had that been, congruent with the rest of the country at that point, I probably never pick up a volleyball, and who knows, I'm certainly not on this interview, but my whole sports life trajectory probably changes. So.
And then, Ruff, as you got into the high school world and started putting in work for basketball and volleyball, like when did you know that you were starting to be pretty good at this sport? I mean, again, you won state titles freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year for both sports. So did you recognize early on that, hey, I'm pretty good at this and we're going to do some work?
That's not a thought that went through my head, but the whole atmosphere at an all boys school was extremely competitive, starting in the classroom. So, walking in, I was wondering what my class rank was, and I was trying to get straight A's. So it was just so professional and competitive from day one, and circumstantially, like just around in every way. So that was a big deal, that you're just in this competitive environment. And then, having a really good, it was volleyball still in the fall, freshman year, and started off with just trying out for the team and seeing how it went. But we had success, and speaking to Jamal Gomes and Coach Harry in those early times as a freshman, I just followed their leadership. And I was so young at 14, 15 years old. I'm not thinking too much at that point other than let's just see how I can contribute in a competitive environment.
How about you, Delsig? When did you know you were getting pretty good? Junior year?
Yeah, I'd say after sophomore year, I spent a lot of that spring and summer playing, I'd say every single day with some people that ended up being the other top players in the state. I think me, Steve Fuller, Kevin McDonald, Scott Grand Prix, if it wasn't every day, it was close to every day that summer. Played doubles, traveled to camps, just touched the ball a lot. And then I sort of remember going into junior year, there was like an end of summer league or summer like flash tournament that was held. And we got back, and when we got on the court, we were just way better than not only than we had been the previous year, but then from everybody else we had sort of seen, at that point during the varsity matches, sitting on the bench during JV, watching varsity play, we're playing guys that we had seen and that are now seniors that were better than. So the expectation certainly grew, and then we had the entire, fall, winter to prepare again and continued to play. So I know going into junior year tryouts and making varsity and playing, I knew we had a chance to do something great because we had all gotten so much better from the previous year. But it was just, a lot of touches, and that, unsurprisingly helped quite a bit.
David, what kind of training did you do for both sports? I mean, I was a basketball guy too. I played in college at the Division III level, and the training between the two sports a lot of it's pretty similar. Like I found that the footwork was very similar, and a lot of the movements, especially if you run a middle, was very similar. So as you were getting better and better and knew that, college athletics was a possibility for you, like what steps did you take to prep and really get yourself to the next level?
Right. So with volleyball, my freshman year, my skill set and talent level is not going to be as good as other players. And really just relying on athleticism as a young athlete, which a lot of people are doing until they develop more skills. And so I'm trying to learn from other people as much as possible. And my freshman year, I actually played in a lot of games and in the playoffs and stuff. And part of the reason Coach Harry told me at the time was really my mental attitude. My skill level wasn't as good as some of the other players. I was playing middle on the second rotation, and I wasn't playing the back end. But this is obviously freshman year, and so Coach Harry really liked my winning mentality or my emerging leadership skills as a freshman in that environment. So that was carrying me over for a bit there. But then, obviously just honing in and trying to learn from others. And like you said, I'm focused on basketball pretty much all year round. So volleyball had a more limited role, but at the same time, I took practice very seriously. And, we weren't joking around in practice. I'm not too familiar with too many other institutions and how they roll, but like everything was very serious. And so I'm trying to be as best as possible, or else I'm facing punishments. And that wasn't me as a freshman or a sophomore, even as much as older guys. And so I was fortunate to be around good coaches and good guys, I'd say. were willing to teach me, and I just absorbed, and I was willing to learn. You know, I wasn't, obviously didn't think I knew all that. I didn't have like a high view of myself as a freshman doing well. I was looking to learn and become awesome at it, hopefully.
And where did you, just to piggyback on what you said, I love you started talking about mental toughness and your winning attitude. Did that start early? Do you think that came from basketball, or, you know, where did you start developing that aspect?
Yeah, I think probably likely through just so much practice of basketball to begin with. You start getting so much confidence, because if you're living, breathing that, then you know, you think you can handle things. And so, yeah, I think that builds toughness. It comes through practice. I wouldn't say you could just think it or read a book about it. I think you have to go out there and get gritty, you know, playing sports, and you'll develop that, and you'll develop leadership qualities. So when other people see you, you're setting a standard of, you better be diving for things, and or else you're letting me down, and you're letting everybody down. So yeah, just that perspective. And yeah, so I think mental toughness was huge. And so all these guys in the playoffs, now that's just going to be a huge part of it, is how they approach things, because you're not going to change your talent level extremely and overnight, just like you're not going to change your body and your vertical overnight. That's all pretty much set, and you can't go back in time and practice more if you didn't. So walking into things, it's how are you mentally focused on things. And to Coach Harry's credit, I think he was always really good at that, very calculated. He was always a good poker player, and he could size up what other people are thinking and what his players are thinking. And yeah, I thought he was a master at that.
I agree. I think Harry's one of the top coaches to ever come out of Rhode Island. I think he's done a nice job. I've actually gotten to work with him a little bit as I'm one of his coaches on the South County side, his club side, and he's helped out a little bit. And I've been very impressed with the things. I've always wanted to know, you know, one of the things as a coach, when you see people who are very successful, it's like, man, I'd love to be in their gym. I'd love to be in their huddle, know what they're saying here. And I got an opportunity to do that this year, and it was pretty fun. I got to learn some cool stuff. So, Eddie, talk to me about the mental side. I mean, as you guys are, junior years when you broke through and won it, from junior to senior year, what was the mental side of it for you?
Yeah, I'd say Dave hit on it pretty good, in that Harry did a great job. The focus for us was always sort of internal and competing against ourselves. And he was always very careful to take what I think were a lot of competitive, gritty, driven individuals, and use that to his and our advantage as a team. Like in practice, it was never, you know, A team versus B team traditionally. It was always outside versus outside, middle versus middle. And those games and those, you know, sort of internal competitions were very, very serious. As Dave said, we all wanted to win at everything we did, whether it was, you know, scrimmages in practice, if we went to go play somebody, regardless of whether we were playing the best team in the state or the worst team in the state, we wanted to win. And, you know, Harry really fostered that and also held a standard himself. I sort of remember more senior year, which is, you know, I'm sort of thinking about what we were going to talk about. And I really do think my personal junior year and my personal senior year are two different beasts, because as a senior, we were so talented that, you know, honestly, like winning wasn't in question for many, if not all of our matches. It was sort of making sure that we played the right way and we held a standard against ourselves versus, you know, playing a team and beating them sloppily wasn't acceptable. And, you know, playing sloppily was never acceptable. But Harry made sure that we continued to stay sharp by pitting us against ourselves, I think. And, you know, I certainly, when I was playing in a drill against like Steve, for example, who was our other outside, I wanted to win that a lot. And I think Steve did too. And that made for some very heated practices, which are extremely important if you're trying to improve during the season. And if you're trying to keep those competitive muscles, you know, growing, if you're maybe not being challenged from the outside competition sometimes. So yeah, I don't know if it's probably a combination of picking and having a lot of competitive driven players. But to Dave's point, Harry did really an exceptional job in making sure to sharpen those skills throughout the year, to make sure that when it came time to play your best game and to play your best matches when it's necessary, that wasn't going to be a surprise for us, that we'd sort of trained that and we're prepared to do that. Now, whether you execute is a different story, but at least he had us as ready as we could be by the time it came time to do that.
Excellent. So before we dive into the mindset and where you guys were at as you were starting playoff runs, whether it be, as a freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior, what have you, Dave, quickly talk a little bit, and Eddie, you'll be next on this as well. Quickly talk about the preparation that went into physically as you got into the seasons and into the year. So weight room and conditioning and stuff like that. What type of stuff did you do to get ready for the season? And to your point, Dave, you're absolutely right. You're not going to be able to fix or do any of that stuff now come playoff time. But what was your prep going into the season?
So our practices, I was just reflecting as Eddie was talking, because Eddie was talking about practices. And practices, I would say, when our team was stacked and we thought we were very good, so Eddie's senior year, those practices were just absolutely brutal. And as a player, I'm not running the practice, the coaches, and we did more suicides and dives, and it was the most difficult practicing of 4 years. Was the most talented team, and I'm assuming that the coaches did that to keep us on our toes and so that we didn't get lax. So we weren't like taking it easy in practice to prepare for a game. That was never a thing. It's okay if you're exhausted, because we think we can handle it physically. So physically it was just extremely demanding, I would say. I think that was all 4 years, but I really remember it because it's like when you're one of the top teams, or you view yourself that way, you would think it would be a little easier, but those were definitely the most difficult practices, and people looked forward to them least. I mentioned earlier, just extremely professional, no joking around and stuff. But volleyball, I viewed it as fun, and a lot of people do, and it should be. But it's fun to win, and so I would say, what were we doing? We didn't work out in the weight room as a team. That wasn't a thing. But we did conditioning as a team, and that was brutal. That weight room stuff was more on your own, and that happened throughout the year, not during playoff time for me personally. I think that was more of a personal decision. And you want to stay loose. I was doing more things like recovering and stretching and trying to stay loose, and trying to rest and give my all, and just in practice in the game. So that was really it at playoff time. Throughout the year, that would obviously change. I'm going to hit the weight room, and I'm going to push myself in other ways throughout the year. And people come up with their personal game plan and how to create themselves as the best version of themselves.
So quickly to piggyback, how did you compare the practices for Coach Gomes in the basketball gym and also Coach Harry in the volleyball gym? Was one specifically more challenging than the other, or just different types?
Different types of challenging. Basketball probably would be more challenging, just because the game itself is nonstop with sprinting left and right. And volleyball, you're going to have a break when a point ends. So I think just naturally the sports lean that way, that you can get a sub in basketball and take a break, versus just the nonstopness of the game. So I think that was determined by the game. But both coaches were professional in both environments, where you're running to go to the water fountain, or bubbler, as they would say, in both practices, because they weren't easy.
How did you prepare physically, Ed?
Yeah, I'd say I was not and am not a great athlete, so I probably should have done a little more lifting and stuff like that. But I played a lot. I know that Dave hit on it. We would beat a team 25-12, 25-10, 25-14 or something on a Tuesday, and then Wednesday we'd be running 25 diving suicides because of some technical effort errors. It was nonstop on the conditioning side, and I think that was by design to make sure that we never let down. But I played a lot, so if we had practice and we didn't have a game, I'd probably go play in a league or play in some pickup that same night. And that's sort of where I continued to stay. I think my focus was certainly more on my skills and technical ability than my athleticism, because that was quite limited. But again, it was just that there was a very, very high standard set by Harry in practice and in games, to make sure that at no point were there lazy habits creeping in. And I certainly know that we had a lot of practices that were more competitive than a lot of our games. And that just, it really set the stage to make sure that when or if we needed, our best level mentally or physically, that we had it in the tank and we're prepared to access it. So yeah, the preparation, I'd say, was not a specific, there was no shift from, say, regular season preparation to playoff preparation. It had been a build for months and years, in every single practice and in every single club practice or pickup game or whatnot. We just happened to be, a mindset drilled into us that, you had to play as close to as perfect as you can play with the best possible habits, with the best possible effort. And that was the only standard you were allowed to sort of have. And I know, looking back on it, I was sort of thinking like, and I thought as I got into the coaching world after college and whatnot, bad habits, I think, only creep in at the worst possible time. Like, I just don't think, if you're lazy, say, we used to do a drill in practice where we would have to make 10 short serves over and over. And I just think there's a lot of ways to sort of to dog your way through a drill like that, or to cheat yourself through that. And you're always going to be able to come into a meaningless game and make a short serve when it matters. But when it really matters, like when you need a short serve in the playoffs, like that's the only time those habits creep in. And it's at the worst possible time with the most possible pressure. So to have a coach and to have teammates that always held you accountable to make sure that you earned every rep and you earned your way out of a drill, regardless of how long it took, was super important, because thankfully when it came time to do something like that, you'd already done it thousands of times. You had done it thousands of times with a mindset that was very serious. You had done it thousands of times with pressure on you, because you wanted to beat your own standards. You wanted to beat your teammates that were doing the same drill. And Harry made sure that was something that was ingrained in us. So by the time playoffs came, we were, I think, mentally prepared to do everything. And like I said, whether you actually do it when it comes time is another thing, but we were as prepared as we could be physically, mentally, to have the best opportunity to play our best. And thankfully we're able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I like what you said there about how when your bad habits creep in at the worst possible times, and they also creep in when you're tired. Like, you always sort of revolt, you fall back to what you know best. And if those are bad habits when you're tired, I mean, that's going to lead to lack of execution. It's going to lead to errors, and volleyball errors are the killer. It's the thing you can't have. One of the things you both talked about, and again, I love the hearing about Coach Harry and his leadership and his dedication to providing an environment that's competitive for you guys, and also an environment that allows you to exceed. Was there a lot of players holding each other accountable? I mean, certainly the coach was holding you accountable to a certain level, but how about the players and the leadership? Were captains necessary? Were they involved? Was there, you certainly had the competition aspect of it, but was there sort of a group of guys or a group of leaders for either of you, or were you those leaders that said, hey, this is how it's going to be, and this is what we're going to do in congruence with what Coach Harry was doing? Start with you, Dave.
Start with me on leadership. As a freshman, definitely looking towards seniors and juniors at the time, and they needed to lead. There's very little I was going to do in terms of telling older kids what to do as a freshman on varsity. As a sophomore, I'm a captain, I believe, and so good luck telling the juniors and seniors still what to do.
Right.
So I was leading by example for the first couple of years. If I was leading, I wasn't telling anybody what to do verbally too much. I was just leading by example. Once I became more of a junior or senior, again, my junior year, Eddie has explained that he and Steve and other players were so talented and very good that we were all probably keeping ourselves accountable, and just pushing each other in practice. And it didn't really take too much verbal communication to get on each other. If there are some clowns in the group or jokesters, we'd probably get on them a little bit. But yeah, I think the players leading is obviously hugely critical, and did a little bit of that. What would you say, Eddie?
Yeah, I can't, you said it right. I can't really think of too many times where anybody had to say, practice harder or anything like that to somebody else. We were very fortunate to have a good group in that regard. And I think it comes down to, I'd say everybody's individual competitiveness. I think there was just a lot of pride in our craft and in playing well and in putting on a good performance. Yeah, so we were very fortunate in that regard where I think just, iron sharpens iron. Everybody played hard. And, if there was, bad practices, it stood out very quickly if you weren't trying because of the talent level in the gym. I think we had a very small group, which I don't know if it's still the case, but I know Harry traditionally liked to carry a very small squad. And we were fortunate that everybody on that small squad was sort of pushing in the same direction at the same intensity. So, yeah, I don't know how it is in other programs, but I don't think there was a lot of, your traditional, captain pulling somebody aside necessary, thankfully. But again, that starts very early in the culture that's built from the people in front of us and the people in front of them and the standard of the school in general. I mean, Hendricken is known as a top sports school. So when you go on a team, it's serious. Your expectations are to win a championship. Period. That's end of discussion. So if you want to keep from disappointing your peers, your school, yourself, there's only one way to do things, and we thankfully, I think for the most part, did things the right way.
So let's move to the prep for the playoffs. So generally quarterfinals, especially with the teams that you guys had, you were pretty strong in those quarters, but the semis and the finals, how did you prep for those teams mentally? It's funny because every coach sort of has a different way of dealing with the playoffs. When I used to take my teams to the playoffs, it was about, just what you guys talked about, standards. Hey, this is the standard we want to play at. These are the marks we want to hit. Not really worried necessarily about who's across the net, but at the end of the day, if there is somebody across the net that's pretty good, we have to account for them. How do we handle them? What's our strategy for that? But what was, as players in, especially, what was it, your senior year when you were stacked? I mean, that's one of the best teams to ever come out of, Rhode Island, in my opinion. I mean, I was an assistant coach with East Greenwich at the time, I believe. And I watched you guys thump people left and right, including the team I was working with. So, what was your prep as you went into the playoffs? Go ahead, Dave. Oh, I'm sorry.
I think there's a two. I didn't mean to stomp on you there, Dave. I really do think there's a delineation between junior and senior year. So I know junior year we had three pretty unique opponents. In the first two rounds, there was sort of one stud player, sort of a heliocentric team where there was some game planning to say, the offense is our opposing offense is going to look like this. And here's some of the defensive adjustments we'll make to sort of combat that. And then the finals, again, not so much a one horse show, but a very good overall team that we knew we could attack in certain ways. So there was some specific game planning in that regard to tweak some defense, some blocking adjustments, or at least some blocking focus onto certain players and how we would sort of deal with that. And then senior year, I mean, I don't want to be facetious here, but we spent the night before the championship making championship T-shirts and pulling our banner off the wall and filling in the number on it because we just knew. And again, that comes off the wrong way, but we knew that if we played to our potential, we were not going to get beat. So it didn't really, game planning was a part of it, but it really was an internal reflection on we just need to make sure that we come out and play the way we're capable of playing. Because if we do, we're going to win, and that's just how it's going to go. So I guess there were two different but two important ways to prepare. There was some game planning. But I'd say the common thread in both years was to make sure that we were ready to play our best, regardless of what our opponents were going to do.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I do remember making T-shirts and definitely fully supported that. So that lends itself to just our mental preparation and confidence and toughness. But what were we doing? Like Eddie said, each year was so different. And each team's going to be unique, what it needs and how it prepares. So each team was so different. And to that point, We had worse teams and better teams. With the worst teams, and we were up against tough competition, we're definitely strategizing a lot. One thing I remember every year was that this is 18 or 16 years ago, so it's a long time, but later in the season, we would generally do things together as a team outside of the volleyball court. So we'd have like a quote unquote pizza party at somebody's house. We're not necessarily having pizza, but we're playing games, we're hanging out, we're doing something as a group, and even the coaches would come and we have fun and do something. So you really build that friendship, and that would come later in the season, but probably before playoffs. That's kind of my memory of it. And I always looked forward to that. I thought it was fun. I always wanted to do it. And you just have this camaraderie. So when you're going into the playoffs, it's like you really have this family you're with. And that's what I remember being really strong and creating those bonds. And so in the playoffs, there were some times, particularly sophomore year, we're losing in the championship game. And there's some doubt and fear in people for sure. If I felt a little bit of it, other people probably felt a lot of it. And how to win under those circumstances, you're really just looking each other in the eye, and you just know that you're kind of family and brothers at that point, and you have each other's back. And that's really all you really got at that point. You're listening to your coach and you're sticking to the game plan. And like Eddie said, you want to play your best ball possible. But I would say those other factors, those little things that help contribute to building a team matter. And it's not just going to someone's house to have a pizza party. That's really not what it is. You want the guys to get along with each other. And if they're competitive, that's great, but also have that, like, remember the Titans type style where they're button heads a little bit, but love each other.
Building on that, how important was compassion for you guys, for your teammates? And what I mean by that is one of the things that I've been preaching a lot of late is, having some understanding and compassion for a teammate that's struggling. I mean, there's no real way in the volleyball world, in my opinion, that you can be successful if you're really upset with one of your players because he can't do the job that needs to be done. As soon as we've all seen it before, somebody's trying to pass a ball, they've been aced twice already, they're in quicksand, they're done. They and the last thing they need is their teammate, ripping them, saying, "Hey, come on, we need you to do this." And so that there's a compassion there of understanding it. Speak to that as well. I mean, I know, especially that one team, there wasn't a lot of worry about where you were going with it, but certainly on other teams, when you're in a dogfight with somebody, picking each other up as opposed to putting each other down. Start with you, Dave.
That's a good question. How do we pick somebody up versus putting them down? I don't know if I have an answer. Generally, yeah, if you're not passing the ball, move over or leave the game or talk to them. I think, yeah, there was that expectation. There was compassion because it's a difficult game and a lot of people are coming from different sport backgrounds, and we understand that. And so we're just expecting you to work as hard as possible. So there's definitely that compassion when somebody isn't been playing this game their whole life. At the same time, if somebody doesn't have a skill set to handle a duty, I mean, we would expect an adjustment. I don't think there's only so many times you can make the same mistake. If you are getting aced, I think slide over, adjust, get somebody in there that can pass. I wouldn't keep doing the same mistake over and over again. And I don't think that should be looked down upon. It's just take a breather, step off to the side for a second, and you'll get right back into it. It's not that you're out of the game forever. And understand that just everyone wants what's best for the team. And so you might need that and to humble yourself, particularly if you're one of the seniors or a leading player. It might be a younger player that is locked in the zone and ready to take it, and having, the wherewithal to allow that to happen is good. But yeah, it is a difficult question, and if somebody's not doing what you'd expect, that's, difficult. And so, yeah, you're obviously yelling at somebody too much isn't going to solve anything. And that's probably not your job as a teammate. So yeah, I think focus on your abilities and help out with compassion, like you're saying, is a good idea.
Eddie.
Yeah, I think Dave's right, but I'd also say, on our specific teams, we were very tight, and everybody was included, from the best player on the team to the quote unquote worst player on the team. When we went to eat before practice, before games, everybody came. If we went to somebody's house, everybody came. We all joked around together before and after practice. We all practiced together. So there was never, I guess by the time there was a critique or a criticism necessary, you had already built up enough trust in all of your teammates that whatever was going to be said was coming from a place that was for the best for the team, and nothing personal or nothing abrasive. So you'd already built up a bond where, somebody could tell me a critique, and we've already been so close and talked about everything where I understand, he's coming from a good place. So it never put me down. And I hope that, everybody else that were quote unquote the weaker players or the quote unquote role players, when their adjustment had to be made, it was done again in a way that had built up a rapport between teammates. But to Dave's point, it wasn't necessary a lot, and a lot of times it did come from the top, which is always helpful too. But there was always, I think, an understanding of what had to be done, and then what was not meeting that standard. And I think we did such a good job of knowing those expectations that when they weren't being met, there's nothing that had to be said. It was known, and it was adjusted by that person, or gently by Harry. But I don't think that's a in the moment process. I think you build up to earn the right to give feedback, whether it be positive or negative, throughout the entire season, starting from the beginning of the season all the way through practices, games, social, to be able to trust your teammate to do that coming from a positive place.
So now we're in the championships, and so you have, Ruff, you had 8 championship matches and games that you went through, and 2 for you, Eddie. So were there nerves before a championship match? And if so, how did you deal with them?
Eddie, you're answering questions well, so I want to hear what you have to say.
I've got a smaller sample size than you did, but I mean, I think junior year, I don't think if Vegas had set odds, I don't think we were the odds-on favorite to win that championship match. There certainly were nerves. Who was
the opponent?
Coventry.
That's right.
Yeah, and they had some good players, and they were in the championship the year before, and had returned all their upperclassmen, and were sort of the top team in the state all year. And they had beat the crap out of us during the regular season. But I know at least when we had left their building during the regular season, and I think which was like a close 5-game loss, where the 5th game wasn't particularly competitive. I know leaving that match, I remember thinking, and I remember Harry sort of saying, like, we're there, like we're at this level now. Like, I know in the preseason tournament they stomped us out, and then by the time we'd seen them during the season, that gap had bridged. So I know that we were probably not the favorites, but the winning was not out of reach. And I know there were nerves there, but those quickly dissipated during. I think when you start playing, you just start playing. And I know we lost set 1 and won the next 3, but I know losing set 1, going back to the huddle, I think there was a lot of optimism as to how we matched up against them the rest of the match. And then to be totally honest, there were not nerves senior year, because again, I really did feel like we had our destiny in our hands. And a lot of teams aren't talented enough to say that. Like, there's going to be situations where if both teams play their A game, another team's A game might just beat yours, and then you're sort of out of luck, and you may need like a little combination of them having an off night and you playing a great game. But I knew if we played our best, we weren't going to be touched. So there was some comfort in knowing that, and some comfort again built up over years and months and years and practices and sprints. And I don't want to sound cliche here, but blood, sweat, and tears going through a lot with the same core group where I knew my preparation level. I knew everybody else's on the floor's preparation level, and I was very comfortable with where we were and what type of performance we would be able to summon for that particular championship game.
I agree. Yeah, again, every team was different. So how do I settle nerves personally? I like there to be some nerves. If I don't feel nerves, I think that's a problem. So if I'm not a little anxious, a little nervous, I think that's a normal human condition when something's important. So if you don't feel that, something's might be off. So I embrace it, and I want to feel a little bit, just not too much, so it's overwhelming. So I embrace it, and I'm looking for it, and I want it. And I think you want to feel that so that you're have heightened senses and alertedness. So I would embrace it my answer to the question. And yeah, there was a quote by Harry going in, I think it might have been my senior year, and somebody was asking him if he was nervous about his team winning in the championship or in the playoffs. And his answer, which I haven't said too many times, is, I think he said, I have Dave Rufful on my team. How could I be nervous? So the coach was saying that about me. And by senior year, I probably wasn't too nervous. As a younger athlete, you're going to have that. And I think embrace it. And as you get more experience and more skills and more confidence over time, your coach might be saying, how could I be nervous? I got so-and-so on my team and he's going to lead, and he's not afraid of the competition. So yeah, it evolved from probably being really nervous as a freshman to being very confident as a senior.
When I used to play, I used to be nervous right up until the opening tip, right? So as soon as I walked onto the floor, I was still really nervous about the match or the game, basketball, volleyball. And then as soon as the opening tip, it all went away. And I used to love that feeling that as soon as the ball was in the air, then I don't have to worry anymore. It's just go time. And same thing with first serve, right? As soon as you step on the sand, floor, whatever your type of volleyball you're playing, as soon as the guy makes contact or your guy makes contact or you make contact for the first serve, then all the nerves are gone. And I felt like I could enjoy myself and compete. But to your point, Ralph, nerves are part of the human condition, and embracing it and understanding what your body's going through as you're prepping for whatever is going to happen. And then once it goes, you just go. I think it's one of the best feelings in the world, to be honest.
I think it's, I mean,
go ahead, yeah.
I just to elaborate, I think it's also like anything else where the more practice you get under those conditions, the more comfortable you feel. And, to that point, if you're taking every practice and every inter squad game, like it's the most important game of your life, which, that's an exaggeration, but if you're taking it with a seriousness to it, then you already have reps under situations where the outcome matters to you. And if that doesn't give you some sort of pressure to win, obviously the consequences of losing a practice scrimmage are not high, but if they're high in your mind and you want to win, there's another practice rep under pressure. And if, you're playing during the summer and you're playing with your buddies, but it means a lot to you to win those games, you already have another rep where, you've had to perform or do these skills in a pressure situation. So by the time you get to that spot where there's real outcomes that determine state championships, at least you have a ton of reps practiced. So you're not shaky. Whereas, if you're not taking reps seriously, if you're not taking games seriously, if that's not how you're built, then maybe your championship match is the first time you felt pressure. And it may take a very long time to adjust and calm down, because I do know exactly what you're talking about, where there's like an environment, there's an ambiance, there's pressure building in the stands until you start to play the game that you've played thousands of times. And then it's like, oh my God, I've done this exact skill at practice. I've done this exact skill in the summer. I've done it in club. I've done it in league. I've done it in this, outside tournament. I know how to do this now. And you sort of get like a settling of those nerves where now you just go and do what you know how to do. And that's the funnest thing.
Oh, it's the best feeling in the world.
Work through those hard practices. That's the reward, is to finally get to play.
Yep, absolutely. Now, I've seen both of you guys perform after high school. Like, I saw some of your Dartmouth games there, Ruff, and I saw you play at BU and do some Yankee stuff there, Eddie. And you guys look the same as when you played in high school, except bigger. You were physically just stronger and more mature and doing your thing. How were these experiences in high school? Did they translate to the next level for you?
Yeah, I would say everything translates into higher level competition, whether that's in sports or business. Kind of how we started out this conversation, probably one of the first things I said was just the whole professionalism and competitiveness of the whole environment there at an early age. So the training, if you're able to handle stress, how you handle stressful situations in life, whether it's in college sports or beyond, and in the professional world as well. So at some point going into college, things are up another pace. You're playing in bigger stadiums and bigger crowd, and there seems like there's more on the line, and a lot of people have scholarships on the line and things of that sort. So yeah, if you're nervous already, it's not looking good. You want to conquer those nerves. And one way to do it is like to hit the weight room or practice more. There's a physical reaction your body's going through where you're nervous, you're like actually shaking. And it might just be in your head, but there's a physiological reaction to your body. But if you put yourself under more pressure, like in the weight room or when you're practicing, then you'll handle that pressure when you need to do something important in business later, or you need to do something in college under brighter lights. And so, yeah, you're taking baby steps, and you're not there's more to it, and there's more to conquer. So it's important what you're doing in high school, very important skills you're learning, and that's a foundation that you'll continue to build on, and you'll see more stressful situations. So how do you conquer those? You need to start somewhere.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important. I mean, we had some rules in high school that, like, one of which, you're just never late. Don't ever be late. Be 15 minutes early. Harry called it the flat tire rule. However long it would take you to change a flat tire, that's how early you should be to practice, because that's the scenario that could make you late. And I think that translates, to Dave's point, to everything in life, not just sports. But I know that certainly carried over in sports, where it's important to be early, and early is on time. It's important to practice like it's a game. In the same way in the professional world, where it's good to be early, it's always good to be prepared. And I just think the more you're assured of your personal preparedness, and that you've put in all the work that you can, and you've done everything you can to be ready, the less nervous you will be in every scenario. And it's not only on the volleyball court, but for me, like if I'm in court, if I feel like I've done the research, I have a certain feeling. And if I feel like, I get in there and I'm like, oh, I don't quite know this one issue, like there's always some unsureness. And the pressure is always there. And the more you will feel more pressure, the less prepared you feel, I think. And that's never stopped, and will never stop, I don't think, in anything in life.
So a couple more questions, and again, I can't thank you guys enough for being on. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I think this type of information from two very successful professionals, both at the business level as well as in the sports realm. I think it's going to be really a nice watch for all these high school kids, and quite frankly college kids that tune in every once in a while to see what I'm talking about. What I like to end these things on are a couple special questions. The first is, what is one thing that you think a player should know that they probably don't? As you guys have competed in all different levels and all different things, what's one thing that you think a player should know that they probably don't yet?
Sure. I'll go first. I think this past week or so, a lot of us, I have been watching, a lot of people in New England watching Joe Mazzulla as the head coach of the Celtics.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about athletes and dealing with nerves and dealing with pressure. I can't imagine being the head coach of a professional NBA team at the age of 35, roughly, and the amount of scrutiny he gets from the media and the world. And I just look at him in the press conferences, and sometimes he just delivers a stone cold answer, keeps it brutally honest, kind of Belichick if in my opinion. And I look at him and I think about all the pressure situations he's been in, the difficult training he's been through growing up. And what would I tell you as an athlete in Rhode Island or any state, looking at somebody like him, is like, you have no idea how hard somebody like that has worked, how much training they've been through, whether it's through mentorship, the impact of his father, the impact of coaches like Jamal Gomes. So just from an athletic standpoint, the way you can eventually sit in a room and deal with the pressure of the media and the world on your shoulders at a young age, it's like you need to put yourself in those situations and welcome the difficultness of practice, and you'll be able to deliver that stone cold answer where it's like, I take responsibility. And it's like, how could you? Or I told him I love him, or whatever his response is. It's powerful because he can deliver it with confidence, and he knows, in his opinion, what was the thing to do in that point. But you don't just wake up like that someday. It takes years of practice and experience. So, that will translate into whatever you do in life, in college. Missoula's been in the Final Four. Neither Eddie and I have done that. So, there's levels to this game. Rocco Baldelli has been an MLB, like we talked about, another great athlete, and so on. So there's levels to this, and but the more you can do that, I'd like to think Eddie and I and Scott, yourself, have all been through a lot of that pressure ourselves, and so it makes us who we are today and helps us deal with things, whether it's with our family or our lives or our teammates, etc. That's what I would tell you. It's just the depth of what you don't know, is because you haven't been there, you haven't done that, and until you do, you need to keep pushing yourself, I'd say.
Well said, Eddie.
Yeah, I very much agree with all that. You sort of stole a little bit of what I was going to say, but I'll go back to a point I made earlier, which is I really think in volleyball especially, and I've seen it thankfully more as a coach than as a player, but the reps you take in practice matter so much, and those warts that you haven't covered because you're not playing seriously enough are only going to show up when it matters most. And I've just seen it, and I can picture some players in my head, and I remember vividly during a season coaching college, watching a certain player really sort of dog a certain drill for a certain skill in a monotonous drill, and just knowing, going into a game 5, like, oh my God, I hope this person doesn't go back to the service line when it matters. And watching her go back there at like 12 all in a game 5 and needing a deep serve that needs to be deep enough to be effective. And thinking back to all those practices where you're supposed to do 10, and watching her specifically do 7 and move on, and maybe taking 8, 9, and 10, where if you're aiming toward the back 5 feet of the court, the back 7 feet was okay for a little bit. And when it came time to need to be able to hit the back 5 feet, it just didn't happen. And that's when it needed to happen. And I do think like preparedness and holding yourself accountable to do the correct work in the correct way with the most effort possible, but more importantly, knowing that you're building toward a place where you can do this under the most pressure possible. So I know, with some perspective, this is certainly not how I thought about it in high school, but with some perspective, like it's important when you're taking, say, a practice serve, instead of popping a serve into the court like you can a million times, like think, we're 14 all in game 5 of the state championship here. Like now I need to actually make this, and now I need to be on point. And getting in that mindset and maybe feeling some of like that manufactured pressure to make that play, and getting reps under that type of mindset will help more than, like I said, anybody can go back there and just lollygag 100 serves inbounds into the middle of the court or whatever the skill may be. And that stuff will not rear its ugly head until you need it to the most. And like I said, I don't know. I don't have stats to back that up, but just my experience has told me that's the only time you fail at it, is when it matters the most. And you just, there's so much time to build up to that moment, and every single rep counts. And I know it's tough to practice like that, but if you want to be the best you can be, that's just how it's got to be done.
If you guys had the opportunity to go back and do it all over again, would you change anything, or do you like the way it all worked out?
I like, Dave, you probably can't complain about how it worked out for you, 8 for 8, but I know I would I wouldn't change a thing, but if I had to critique, I would get my fat ass on a treadmill for a few hours in high school, maybe be in a little better shape. But honestly, like that's the most, those are the best 2 teams I've ever played on from a competitive standpoint, from a closeness standpoint. Those are the best, some of the best years in my athletic life. With those guys and with those teams day in and day out, on the court, off the court, wrapping up your 20th sprint. Like there was just a lot of pride in those groups, and that was a pretty special squad, I think.
Right. I probably wouldn't change too much. It's a special environment to be able to go to a school where you can really bond with the guys and have a good coaching staff there. I was really very fortunate and blessed. I think volleyball changing the rules a little bit and changing the season, we touched on it earlier. One big thing that happened was by changing the rules where you rally scoring versus, it made all of us be unable to holds some records. So Rocco still has the most kills in our Hendricken history, at least. And I was only able to get second on that, because you're not having the back and forth. I was able still to get aces, blocks, digs, so I'm not too upset. But yeah, maybe I would just tongue in cheek keep the rules the same, because I want to see if I can get more kills than Rocco.
I would have also loved the 120 kill match or whatever he was able to do in some playoff runs, like the 80 something kills on like 150 swings. That sounds like a very fun night.
Well, yeah. I don't know if you guys know, but there's this kid right now at Charahoe High School named Matty Tiernan, who he's a setter by trade. He's been a setter for his whole career. And actually for the South County 18-1s, for me, he's our starting setter. And for Charahoe to be successful this year, they moved him to the pin, and he's averaging 7 kills a set. Like he's got nearly, I think he's at 560 kills. I mean,
that's
the dude's just taking swing. Yeah, he's taking
massive
swings.
Number. Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, your shoulder's gonna fall off. You're not supposed to be taking 60 swings as a setter, for your first time as a pin. Yeah, I'm with you. I actually enjoyed. I mean, we could do a whole podcast, and I know you guys have better things to do than talk to me, but we could do a whole podcast on the rule changes and how I disagree with probably all of them. I liked it when volleyball was very, very hard, and you had to really work to score points, and you had to, really be perfect as a setter, and you needed to pass with your platform. I mean, we could go all through it all, but yeah, Dave, I think if you had side out scoring and some of the teams that you were on, you would have caught Rocco. But I think Rocco probably would have loved to have 8 wins. I think he only had 2. Yeah, he's with you, Eddie. 2
in volleyball, right?
Yeah,
2.
Track, baseball, and things. I don't know.
Yeah, it turned out all right for him. I think he's
doing just fine. Yeah. I'm glad that you guys answered my call. I mean, I tried to reach out to Rocco and Missoula, but they turned me down. No, I didn't talk to them. I don't know them that well, but it is interesting. I mean, one of the things certainly, we can pivot on there quickly is that Hendricken has provided a lot of high-level athletes and professional expertise. I mean, it's all throughout the sports world, and you guys are 4 that we just talked about that are really excelled. Hendricken's a heck of a school, certainly.
It's a good plug. Yeah, I enjoy it.
It's a good plug.
Yeah, it was something about being with just all the guys every day. Like I said, you were very free to be yourself and to just hang out with your boys every day. Like I certainly haven't felt that since. But that was a great environment, especially for sports. There was just a lot of, as you can imagine, just a lot of competitiveness, a lot of testosterone in everything. Like Dave touched on in the beginning, like it was a very competitive environment in the classroom, to the sports world, to the drama world, whatever it was very, very competitive and by design probably, but it fostered you to have to be your best to excel.
Yeah, when I was thinking about moving my kids over there, and I ended up doing that. I mean, I reached out to you, Eddie, and the first thing you said was the best time of my life. I was like, really? Most people don't say high school is the best time of their lives.
Yeah. But you have different fun, but just like I said, I'm still very close with a lot of guys that I was classmates with, and they're my best friends now. So that's I don't know how common that is, but.
And I'm with you, Dave. I thought Missoula handled himself so well throughout this whole first year at the helm of the Celtics. I thought he was outstanding, and they should, I don't know what his contract is, but they should sign him to a long term, because the dude was quality.
It's good. He's coming back. Good. I'm biased obviously here, but I thought he did fantastic. And to your point, the media really needed somebody to latch their jaws into, and he handled a lot of critiques, not all of which I thought were fair, with class and grace, and certainly more composure than a lot of people in his position at his age would have done, and that was pretty admirable.
Cool. So what does the future hold for you guys? What are you guys up to?
Trying to lower my handicap every day. Play volleyball twice or 3 times a year, and just we were talking off camera a little bit, Res, but it's now, once you have a kid, it's all about your kid, and that's what it's become for me. And when I can get a chance to play some golf, that's my competitive outlet now. But it's just making sure that she's she's as good as she can be and prepped for whatever's out in this scary world that gets scary once, like I said, once you have kids, everything changes. So yeah.
Right now I still have a competitive drive, and so I have a couple companies in Florida. I'm at one of my offices here, and just still trying to be a leader and still trying to win in competition. And the goal becomes later in life to retire early, so you want to make money to provide for your friends and family and loved ones and so forth. So yeah, the competitiveness just keeps you having that will to live and fire to do things and have an impact on the world and make the world a better place. So all these kids in high school that are athletes, I think every business wants to hire athletes because they're leaders, they're tested physically, they'll get up at 5 a.m. or earlier. A lot of times I come into the office 4 a.m. I'm still crazy and I'm 34. So crazy work ethic that is. So yeah, I mean, I'm still at the age where I'm going after it. And I think, yeah, while you're young and able to do all the things you can on God's green earth. So still going at it.
Perfect. Well, guys, again, thank you so much for being on. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing how the Rhode Island high school boys volleyball playoffs sort of finish out. There's actually some cool matches coming up, but it really has been wonderful talking with you both and learning about your paths in the sports world and your expertise. Really high level stuff. Thank you so much. And, tune into the ResV channel if you'd like to see some more of me pretending to know what I'm talking about. But again, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Res, thank you. This was fun.
Awesome.
Anytime.
Thanks, Scott.